As if the world wasn't tortured by enough war already, the news went public that the Socialist Republic of Italy had declared war on the two Sicilies. America endured a civil war that roared on for many months, and MacArthur's troops were fighting a losing battle. Not too long after, the Legionnaire Italy saw an opportunity to declare war on the Socialist Republic under the motto, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Spain was also divided and shattered in a three-way civil war that for the moment continued equally amongst the three factions. With the US Civil War now continuing for over half a year, Canada's political bureaucracy was finally ready to set Defense Scheme 2 into motion. The plan was originally created for a scenario where America was attacked and invaded from the outside. With a full-blown war now dominating from the inside, experts believe that Scheme 2 could be updated to benefit in this current environment. The US forces fighting in the west of the country had been cut off once before, and now had been cut off a second time, quickening the destruction of their held positions everywhere. But the soldiers labeled Washington's Hope were battle-hardened soldiers fighting for a cause each of them believed in. Several thousand troops were enough to still kindle hope in a situation that seemed hopeless. Then word got out regarding the wars in Europe. The Habsburg capital was lost. The Hungarian army pinned the remaining Austrian soldiers on the banks of the Danube. And rumor had it that the Austrian royal family fled while they could. Now the city was completely controlled by Hungary, its many artists and musicians living in apprehension of what would become this cultural bastion of Europe. Hungary was planning a great military parade around the Ringstrasse in celebration of this massive military feat, and the Hungarian general in charge of the occupation was going to address citizens from the balcony of the Neue Burg to try to ease the worries of a population worn by weeks of fighting. In Spain, that had a stalemate between the three factions for the longest time, things now hinted towards a breakage of the Carlist Spain faction. The countries part of the Entente, besides Canada, were assigned a new task. With King Edward now being forced to shift his attention to the US Civil War, the preparations for the war to retake both France and Britain needed to be done by the others. King John III saw to it himself to guide the reinforcing of the Entente's power. Then some surprising news arrived from Asia. It had recently come to light that the mad Baron of Mongolia, Roman Ungarn von Sternberg, had risen to new heights and declared himself to be the successor to Genghis Khan, appropriately named Ungarn Khan. It was not known what this change would entail though. The Mongolian army had already defeated the Maklik, and von Sternberg had declared his right to reign over all Mongolians numerous times before. Experts denied the possibility that the Mongolians could pose a threat to the established powers in the Far East, but the fresh Khan's ambitions could only grow higher. In Romania, the civil war had also been entangled in a stalemate, with Cotronu on the doorstep of the loyalists of the monarch. In America, the Civil War now concerned mostly the Union State and the Syndicalists, with the CSA having an advantage in terms of controlled landmass. In Britain, Gleis was in the process of improving relations with contacts and representatives in Australasia. After the questioning of the unions by Australasia's two towers, Gleis figured a spreading of influence could slow the Entente down as the Third Internationale strength grew in Europe. And Europe was rapidly delving into utter chaos. It was only a matter of time before the German Empire would be thrown into the conflict as well, and the Kaiser was in the process to reform Mitteleuropa. The Kaiser's allies in Deutsch-Mittelafrika were currently improving infrastructure via the Cape to Cairo Railway. In America, the US forces only had a sliver left on the Western Front, and it did not take long before those soldiers got crushed and executed in cold blood. Washington's hope still held out, completely cut off from the rest of the country and baptized by blood and fire. In Romania, Cotronu hoped that with the purchase of new infantry weapons, a breakthrough could be made in the civil war. Both factions had lost many of their troops, and the war seemingly would not end anytime soon. Then a public statement arose on Russia's ambitions. While many still viewed Russia as a failed state, torn apart by revolts, disorder, and ineffective rule, and serving as a buffer for the Reichspakt, recent events had proven something different. The government of the Russian nation had announced their territorial ambitions, laying claims on almost all the territory of the former Russian Empire. And it appeared they were willing to reconquer the lost land if necessary. Numerous nations in Eastern Europe had already recalled their embassies in Russia, and the world was waiting for Germany's response to this blatant attack on her sphere of influence. In America, Washington's hope was able, even after suffering setback after setback, of still pulling off expanding attacks land inward, though these were usually short-lived. Europe was in utter misery. It was destroyed in multiple countries, at multiple fronts. News on the movement in the Spanish Civil War was announced. It was confirmed that the Carlist temporary capital, Burgos, had been captured by advancing anarcho-Spanish troops after skirmishes in the hilly countryside. Carlist forces put off stiff resistance, hoping to delay the enemy forces, but were eventually beaten back. Castilians fled north to the Basque coast, tearfully describing seeing their homeland burning, and syndicalist soldiers even committing atrocities on their own people. Rumors stated King Javier was escorted out with the flow of refugees by Carlist militia, but his destination remained unknown. Many hoped Carlist Spain might continue fighting in the Central Plateau to defend their homes from the crush of the syndicalist invasion. As most eyes were fixated on the three-way civil war in the US, some overlooked the war between Mexico and the Pacific states, of which the latter slowly was beaten every other week. With Canada working its way through Defense Scheme 2, it was all but natural that their army needed to expand, and with the help of the newly instated Frederick M.W. Harvey, Chief of Staff School of Mass Combat, a boost was expected. With Washington still holding on, and Defense Scheme 2 set in motion, a transmission was sent to MacArthur. It was an affirmation of Canada's support for the government in Washington and an expansion of diplomatic relations, lest they fall and Canada found itself standing alone against a dangerous rogue state. The transmission was ended with the words, "Up with the stars." The civil war in Italy also bared some development as word got out that Rome had fallen. An Italian general had secured the surrender of the Eternal City. For days, Italian troops had fought through the suburbs, and while some of the swampy areas were still under papal control, the major highway through the center of Rome and the Vatican City was completely locked down. Papal soldiers had been seen dispersing into the low foothills surrounding the ancient capital of the Roman Empire. The Socialist Republic of Italy had been careful to announce that special military police were on hand in the city to prevent the looting of the Pantheon, and they were in negotiation with the Pope to see what autonomy the Vatican could retain while under Italian occupation. The war between the Austrian Empire and Hungary had shifted tone, as the Austrians were able to secure more enemy territory as of recent. And in Spain, the civil war was nowhere near ending, but it did draw near for those affiliated with Carlist Spain. Washington's hope now attempted an attack up north, most likely to link up with the Canadian borders to establish better communications and easier access for supplies regarding the land lease. As the leader of the Baharaches Commune's faction of moderates and his recently elected head of state, A.K. Fazlul Huk, gave a fiery speech to an electrified crowd in Calcutta, promising that his new syndicalist government would usher in an era of prosperity and industrial growth for the nation. He dismissed any notions that this might mean a more conciliatory approach towards the dominion of India to the north and the princely federation to the west, saying that the Commune would do whatever it took to spread the workers' revolution across the Indian subcontinent and the rest of the world. His election was interpreted in many corners as an indication of closer relations with syndicalist nations elsewhere, and some were speculating whether this might mean entry for the Maharaja Commune into the Commune of France's Internationale faction. As Europe continued to eat away at itself, the conflict in Italy drew to a close. The Socialist Republic of Italy stood victorious, claiming land, and now only had to deal with minor factions up north. And at the end of September, the Austrian Empire remained standing as the dust settled after the war with neighboring Hungary. The assault up north by Washington's Hope was put down hard, but the soldiers refrained from surrendering. They would not be able to win this war by themselves, and the real question was if Canada could get the bureaucracy through quick enough to save what was left.